I'm really happy Jan's here to speak with us, talk with us, and share. I contacted her, I think it was about a year and a half ago, and asked her if she'd come to last year's SIG retreat. But she was already in town the week before that doing a workshop. But we kept in touch, and then she said she'd be delighted to come to this year's retreat. What's really amazing is she's an accomplished writer before any of this, and nominated for a Pushcart Prize for her prose and her poetry. I think I'm going to let Kelly talk a little more about her. Kelly Smith is a SIG member who brought Jan in last year for the workshop, and they've become good friends since. And I thought I would just say hello, good morning, open it up, and then let Kelly talk a little more about Jan. Jan's new book, The Freedom of Being at Ease with What Is. I think what's really important, and I love what Paul was talking about last night, it's not a sense of ease. You drop into ease, and it's always, always there. And that's what it is. It's ease no matter what. And I think that's a really great word to remember. And I love the title of Jan's book. And I loved how Paul hit it so directly last night. I don't want enlightenment. I want ease now. That's really beautiful. And then I'm looking forward to hearing what Jan has to say. And so I'll introduce Kelly Smith, member of the SIG group.
Thanks. Good morning. It's been my pleasure and honor to have Jan stay with me this weekend. And when people ask me to describe Jan, the first thing that comes to mind is she's a wellspring of compassion. It just pours out of her, regardless of who she's with. Animals, spiders. It just is who she is. And it's perhaps one of the few people that I've ever met who exemplifies unconditional love. And when I asked Jan to come down last year, a friend of mine and I put together a weekend retreat. I didn't know that this conversation had already started a long time ago. So last year the retreat was really significant for quite a few people. And I'm really glad that she was able to come back this year and have some time on the agenda. And her first book is how I got to know her. And the title of that book was what drew me to her. When Fear Falls Away, the story of a sudden awakening. And she writes through it in almost a day-to-day log of what is happening, and she didn't know what was happening at the time. So her second book, haven't finished it yet, but I'm really enjoying it. And I just wanted to read a poem in the beginning that's called Open the Door. It's not about you. It's not about you at all. We'll explain in a second.
She has no idea. Too bad Bruce wasn't here. He would appreciate that. Maybe he is. I don't know.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay. Open the door.
It'll happen again.
On the other side of the familiar is the extraordinary. Have you always known this is so? That quiet hunch that there is more to life than the day-to-day absence of satisfaction. Everything a door, every wall an opening on second look. Every floor a trapdoor. Every solid thing you lean against, a thing on hinges. When you walk through and look back, it's gone. When you drop through and look up, there's only sky. You are floating, but nothing's holding you up. It isn't the way it appears to be. You aren't what you think you are. When you think you've got it, and you put your fingers around it, your hand comes up empty. There never was anything to be afraid of. Outside the room of every terror, someone is looking in the window, smiling. That's you. Give it a go. You don't have forever. What if you had only a day in which to do the one thing that matters? Today is the day. Don't try too hard to figure out what this means. Smell something burning? It's the inside of your head. Just let yourself fall backward. Never mind wondering if you'll be caught. It isn't a dream. It's real. You are the dream. Know what you know. Open the door.
Thank you, Kelly. You've all gone to some trouble to be here, and lots of you have gone to some trouble to keep things nice for all of us, and I just want to say I appreciate all of that, and just the recognition that it involves something of where your focus is and what matters to you to get you to set aside whatever else you might have been doing at this time to be here. When things change, when it goes from the way it's always been to the other way, there's only one thing that's actually changed. It's entirely a matter of perspective. That's all that changes. So when you're focusing on how to be better, do better, be more present, drop the illusion, get some idea, all of which is taking place in the mind, it's wonderful to remind yourself, as often as you think to remind yourself, that the only actual problem is that you can't see what's right in front of you. And once you see it, you can't believe you ever missed it. But of course, this side of that having occurred, all you can do, all the mind can do, is look at the fact that none of that is obvious to me now. And so it seems like the only way to get to where it could become obvious is to do something to change. So you try hard. You go to a lot of retreats and read a lot of books and think a lot and set intention and have a practice and make plans and dream. And meanwhile, all of that keeps time going. And the belief in time is part of the problem in the first place. Time has to be real to make it palatable or even possible that I cannot presently see what's right in front of my face. Time has to get introduced as a way to make that parent contradiction manageable. Otherwise there's a gaping hole of despair. But only if the ego is the one doing the looking. we can't stand to be backed into this little tiny corner of the now, because if the now isn't wonderful, isn't awake, so after the perspective shift has occurred by some means that will probably always be mysterious, it's not something you can cause by going at it directly anyway. After it's occurred and you look back, you may be able to see that one of three sort of structures that has kept the old way going, one of those three things has fallen. This is just a way of looking at this, you know. You've heard a lot of ways of looking at this weekend. This is a way. But in order for the old way of being a person to hold itself together, there are three things that have to seem real to you. If any one of them goes, the other two are very likely to go as well. And it's like these three things are like a three-sided pyramid, which is really, I think, a tetrahedron, but we'll just say pyramid. Three sides. And they come to a stable point. They all depend upon each other. They all make contact with each other. One of them is the belief in a self, the belief that you are who you appear to be. Another one is the belief in time. That time exists someplace besides your head. That there's anything but the now. And the other one is belief that what you think is a rendering of reality. That thought is real. I mean that the content of the thought is real. All of those things depend upon each other to keep going. And basically, in the ordinary way of being a person, we live inside that windowless structure. We're already in it. And you could say the base that's made by those three things is the sense of the real. That's what our feet are on. There's no window in there. It's a real dark. So if I say only this now, only this right now is real or ever will be, if you look for a self right now, how you experience, who is that I, what does that I feel like, all you can get is what's being presently perceived and what's going on in the mind. But if you take this out, or if you at least see the artificiality of any thought about yourself, and then ask, what do I experience right now as me? A whole lot of what you're used to thinking of yourself as being is not locatable. It doesn't exist except as a thought. If we couldn't remember our experience, the formative stuff, the painful stuff we haven't gotten over, the wonderful stuff we wish we could get back to, if we couldn't retrieve any of that via memory, if we couldn't project ahead to what we wish for ourselves, awakening being one of them, this is really important. If we couldn't kind of collect to awareness our cluster of values, our beliefs, our, what we identify ourselves as being, who we are in the world relative to family, society, work stuff. If we couldn't summon to the mind, the egoic, this is the mind that functions in service to the ego. If we couldn't do that for some reason for a few seconds, and I asked you, where are you? What does that mean, you? All you could come up with is what you're perceiving right now. What your body feels like, what, kind of the awareness of the immediate environment. So if thought isn't in the picture, just for however long that's occurring, you cannot find yourself. And sometimes when somebody has an experience of utter stillness where they know, I don't mean mentally, I mean viscerally, they know that only now is real. One of the things they might notice, and it can be unnerving, is that they're not there. Sometimes, and everybody's had this experience, when there's purity of attention to something, anything, it does not matter what. But the remarkable things, the things we remember, are the shocking things, or the incredibly wonderful things, or, so say, but I'm going to pick a painful thing, and you'll know this, you'll recognize it. You're driving along, everything's normal, all the cars are doing all the normal stuff, and all of a sudden, wham, right in front of you, there's a terrible accident. And no doubt in your mind that somebody in there may be dying or about to die. And, everything stops, you do whatever you do to respond. But after an experience like that, when you revisit it, you'll notice what we say, time stopped. Now, time didn't actually stop. It's just that for once you realized that if you're not thinking, time the appearance of time being real cannot happen. So you notice that the attention, the accident is severe, and all of a sudden whatever was going on in your mind, where you were headed, the revisiting of what happened this morning is just obliterated. All the attention is on this thing. Or same thing, you're watching on a stage, a beautiful, somebody who's singing and your heart is just breaking with the beauty of it. And if you go looking for yourself right then, which you won't even think, why would you care to? Everything in you is on the song. But if you went looking, you might find yourself in the notes, in the singer, in the air between you and in the joy in the body. So one of the things that happens in a moment of intensity of attention is the suspension of the illusion of time, but also this incredible sense of peaceful well-being suffuses you, even in the case of a car accident. And people will remark on this later. Sometimes people who have been in battles, people in concentration camps have spoken of it. That, under the most hideous negative circumstances, something, whatever was going on that absorbed all the attention, brought about a condition of profound inner peace. What is that about? Clearly it's not about the circumstance. It's about the fact that something shocked. This is why people race cars and climb mountains. They want that experience. It's why people play ping pong. It is exactly what's going on there. The attention, all your attention has to be right there, moving, responding. You don't have time to think. It doesn't matter whether it's ping pong or a car accident or an aria on a stage. When all of your attention is on the immediate thing, then do you feel what you are made of. That's what's going on there. And the sense of self, of being a somebody, has just become profoundly irrelevant. You have to start up the thinking thing again to recover, who I am, what my life is about, all that stuff. Right? So if I say to you, your life, what does that bring up for you? My life is this way, my life is that way. It's something like, it's either an arc looking, that exists along a timeline, involves memory and anticipating. So you're sort of looking at the whole big picture, which is the cumulative story. That's my life. Or it might be what my life consists of right now. So it's kind of the mental framework of the present circumstances, my issues, my setup, where I live, what I'm doing and all that. Who I am, who I seem to be. That's my life. That's me. But what you discover in a moment of absolute stillness, and this is not just after the big, this isn't like you cannot experience this until the big shebang. You have already experienced it. In a moment when you're absolutely in the now, when all of your attention is with the immediate and your mind is quiet, that's all the life you'll ever have right there. That is your life, what you're experiencing right now. And the ego pitches a hissy fit about that. It says, no, my life is all the stuff I've done. My life is how important I am to my children, and, but if you couldn't think, if just for a minute, something put the thought into suspension, something like you're playing ping pong and you don't have time to think about your issues for a second, then isn't that when we know we're alive? When is it that you can tell you're alive? It's in encounter, it's in perception, it's in sensation. When everything that ever happened that's rememberable occurred in some now. And when you might get that mentally for 30 years and it won't do you a damn bit of good. But when you really get it in your viscera, when you really get it, time cannot function in the same way after that. It becomes purely a practical thing. So on our way here this morning, Kelly and I were talking about something about tomorrow morning, that I need to get a boarding pass because I'm going to get on the airplane tomorrow. So the mind can turn on sufficient to anticipate and plan and all that. Practical. Our minds are wonderful. But nowhere in there am I living in the flight that hasn't happened yet. But we still know we have to do certain things to anticipate, to plan. It's just that our minds are so good. It's like the reason there's a problem, the reason we think we are our thoughts and all the rest of what we think we are, our history and beliefs and conditioning and all that, is that our minds are so excellent at convincing us of the reality of their renderings. And, thank God, it's what's enabled us to do all kinds of wonderful things, to learn and to plan and to share experience. So I learned something here and share it with you, and then you don't walk in front of the same place where the tigers are living later, So it's a blessing that we invented language and all of that. It's a wonderful thing. It's just that the ego, over the course of our evolution, at least this is what appears has happened, the ego said, come on, let's get together on this. And so what happens is the ego invests with actual reality as if whatever the mind comes up with is on the same plane of the real as this moment. So and then we think, no, and the thought that's going on can be either interpretive about what the senses are actually perceiving or what the body's actually feeling. So it's, the mind is saying, this is good, this is really good, or this is progress, or I don't like this at all, or this shouldn't have happened. Or, oh, I know what this is because I'm a Libra or something, Some kind of, it's going through some kind of mental filter. So it's either that's going on, and so whatever we're thinking, we mix it up because the mind is so good. When the mind, when you picture something visually, you get an image, or the words are, and there's a story, and your body responds to it, like fear is the great thing where we can see this. You're imagining the horrible thing that could happen. And then, pretty soon your stomach's in an uproar. And, so it's like your mind is so good at convincing you of the present, actual, literal, immediate reality of the thought that your body responds as if it were so. This tells you how highly evolved our minds are. What a blessing that is. But it's not a blessing when it causes you to suffer. So the thing to do, as you're watching yourself in the present. That's all you've got. All you've got is right now. It's not going to change. No, really. When you bring your attention to what's going on in your interior right now, you see that you're thinking, see the power of your thoughts to convince you to generate actual physical response. It's a phenomenon to observe. So what you're doing, the things that I call the three sides of a pyramid, the belief in the self, the belief in the reality of your thoughts and in time, all of those things are functioning all the time to keep you believing you are the person you seem to be. If they weren't functioning all the time, one of them would have gone at least and the light would have come in and you wouldn't be going to retreats. So, the thing that you truly can profitably do in the moment, in actual present tense life, when your attention remembers to notice what's going on right now, what thoughts are occurring, and I'm investing them with the same level of reality as this thing I'm sitting on. And it's, the idea is not to stop yourself from thinking, which you may have noticed doesn't work. But thought in and of itself is not a bad guy, just like the ego isn't. It's when we think it's what we are that's the problem. Or when we, so when you notice yourself thinking, you have two options, only two. And the ego does not like that there are only two, but there are two. One of them is to believe the thought, to think that basically the thought stuff starts up and you step into it, it's a play, but you step into it as if it's real, and then you completely have forgotten that there's anything else outside of it. For the period of time that you're in that thought, it's not a play, it's reality as far as you're concerned. So one of your options when any thought, and I'm talking about egoic thought, not the practical kind that says we need to get the boarding pass printed out. I'm talking about the kind of thought that causes pain or artificial joy. The kind of joy that... That's exciting. Wow. So, as you watch yourself think, different moments, lots and lots of times it'll go on and you won't notice it. But then when you do, you'll learn, first of all, what I call clean thought, the difference between clean thought that's not pain, it has nothing to do with the ego. It's a tool, it's useful, it's why it's good we have that kind of intelligence. Learn the difference between that kind of thought, the thought that can penetrate and figure things out, solve problems, share knowledge. That kind of thought, and the other kind, which is the one that occurs 99% of the time, which is why after you wake up your mind gets quiet, because you only do the useful kind of thinking. So that's one kind of thing that can go on. You notice the two kinds of thoughts. I'm going to get back to the two options. When you see that you're doing the egoic kind of thought, you got two choices. You've already probably been inside the room that the thought created. Because the reason your attention gets called to thinking in the first place, thinking that's ongoing right now, okay, this is actual in the now, which is all you've ever got. The reason very often your attention is called to it is that you've got some kind of discomfort. We don't like discomfort. That's why this retreat happens. People want to feel better. It's all about feeling better, being happier, all that. So something will cause you to feel like, suddenly you realize you're obsessing or worrying or pissed off or something, and then your attention, if you're doing self-inquiry sometimes, will go to the phenomenon that you're thinking. Your options are step back into the room, because momentarily you're out of it. While you're observing that you're noticing, oh, I've been thinking. At least you're kind of in the threshold of the doorway. You got one foot in and one out. But there's option now. So you can either enter that world as if it's real and let it cause you to suffer, or you can step beyond it and see it as a phenomenon. That's it. Those are your options. The ego wants to say, oh no, but there's good thoughts and there's bad thoughts. Or, oh, but it's a true thought. So bad does the ego want to convince you of that. That if it's true that, whatever, your car is being repossessed and you just now remembered it. You already got the paperwork, so it's true or something, I don't know. The ego wants to think if it's a true thought, somehow it's justified to live inside of it as if it's just as real right now as the thunderclap as it's happening. It's not whether it's true. I mean, as Byron Katie is fond of helping people discover, half the time what you think is true ain't, but to me it's not, and that has its usefulness. But even if you could somehow demonstrate that a given thought is actually true, if you look at it in terms of what is the extent of the present reality of this thing that's in my head, compared with the texture of the cloth on my legs, or compared with the heartburn I've got right now, or the thing that the person I'm listening to is saying. Okay, what's real is that a thought is occurring. That's a real phenomenon, that a thought is occurring. But the content of the thought is not real. It's made up. If you couldn't think, if you forgot just for a minute that the car was being repossessed, see, the ego wants to say, oh no, but it keeps being true even if I'm not remembering it. That's how powerful our minds are. That's how hard they work to convince us that it's impossible for us not to think all day, and it's somehow justified, even necessary, to keep thinking about the hard stuff that's going on. It's like we have this impression of the need for vigilance, right? But so I'm going to say this thing I told Kelly this morning. When you stop thinking a thing, and then a little while later you realize, oh, I forgot all about it. It's like, what that feels like to have stopped thinking about a thing that's still true, but if now is really all you've ever got, and now is what you can experience directly, what you can perceive, then if you're not thinking about a thing, even an ongoing thing, even a real thing, if you're not thinking about it right now, in terms of how you actually experience your life, which is right now, the thing is not real. You have to think it into being. This isn't like a mental game. It doesn't mean, okay, the world is still out there. Yes, even if it's in your body, you found out you have cancer. If you're not thinking about it right now, you're not going to suffer because of it, are you? And the value of really seeing that is to see the power that your mind has. And, and this is, this is ongoing. So, a family member a while ago was blindsided by her husband, who announced that he was leaving her. She thought they would always be together. And in the same month, she found out she had cancer. So, it's like, bam, bam, So she was sobbing one day in her bedroom, just, you can imagine how she felt. Sobbing, sobbing, sobbing. And she just, collapsed and sat down on the floor, still crying. But because the angle of her vision was such that she could suddenly see under the bed, her eyes just happened to go over there, and she saw under the bed a shoe that had been missing for a while. And all of a sudden, she wasn't noticing this happening just yet, but all of a sudden, the tears just stopped, the whole upset drained out of her, and she went, oh, I'll be darned, look at that shoe. Now, we've all had this experience. Now, the wonderful thing about this woman is she was in the moment. She was watching herself. She watched how something getting her attention, ordinary thing like a shoe, had, you could say, the power to shut her mind down. The story went away. Just for a second, she forgot her husband was leaving her and that she had cancer. Now, her husband was still leaving her and she still had cancer. But you see, when you really live your life, which is now, period, you might die in the next minute. And someday that'll be true. Okay? You have to live as though it's always true. When you live as though this right now really is it, what does that mean? It means your attention, this is not thinking. Attention and thinking are not the same thing. Your attention, it's like light. It's like being with, it's recognition, awareness. When your attention is flooding, is allowed to flood, which is what it, you could say, wants to do, that is what we're made of. We're trying to discover what we already are. It's so important that you get that. This is not about you becoming something different. As long as you think that, you'll chase it forever. It's already going on when you allow attention to feel itself and flood the everything that's in your present moment range of awareness. When you allow that to happen, and it's obvious when you're playing ping pong or you just came on a terrible car accident, but it's all the time it can be this way. In any moment when that occurs, your mind gets quiet. It just does. And even if you start thinking, if you remember the two options. One of them is to play ball with the thoughts, dance, get in there and dance with the thought. But the other one is to see that you are thinking. See it as a phenomenon. So even when, one of those moments when say, something has really got your attention, or for some reason, or you just come out of meditation, something happened to cause all of your awareness to flood the immediate. You're at peace. You are at peace. That's when you know what you are. Now, one of the things your attention may notice is that there has been thought going on. And it can even, very often when attention comes to the fact that you've been thinking, that the thinking loses all interest in itself and stops. But sometimes it'll keep on, or it'll keep coming back, it'll keep sneaking in the door because it didn't really get latched, keeps trying to come in and convince you to, come on, let's dance. And you can observe that happening. It's attention that's observing that. Attention is what you are. It's what you are. And you're endowed with this. It's part of our equipment. This is not something that's conferred upon you when you wake up. And so this whole thing about focusing on the future, where, if I can do all the right things, or, burn off enough karma, or, live enough lifetimes, or, God, horseshit. Somebody said yesterday, I thought, oh good, I can say horseshit here. That's great. But, you can hear somebody say this 1,000 times, but until you, and here's where again, so all you got is right now, until you watch how it functions in your immediate present moment awareness, till you observe it, oh yeah, look at that, how it's, you'll get nowhere. So, and somebody alluded to this yesterday. One of the interesting things that happens when you get your mind off of the future in which you hope everything will finally be good, when you really get that this is all you've ever got, this ordinary, sometimes crappy moment, I'm talking about the content of it looks crappy. Once you really get that, you might lose interest in waking up. Because what is waking up going to deliver you into but just being in the present and not resisting anything? Now, one of the things that goes on with seekers, and here's where the difference between thinking and attention becomes really vivid, experientially. One of the things that goes on is when people start becoming self-aware and doing self-inquiry and all that, for the longest time, and for some people forever, what you see just makes you wince. It's horrible. You want to be compassionate, and you want to have a quiet mind, and you want to be unattached, and so you look in there and you watch yourself, if you have the guts, In the present moment, watch how twitchy you got because somebody that you thought was your friend didn't give you the time of day, or, whatever. It goes on constantly, all day long. This assault, what we perceive as assault to the apparent self, and the defense, constantly repair. It's like we're repairing all day long. That's why we're tired. That is exactly where our energy goes. It's in the constant maintenance of the self. Feel better, feel better, feel better. Well, the self feels terrible only when the ego is doing the looking. The part of you that you could say is already there doesn't give two shits what the ego is doing. Really. From the point, it's like light. When you shine light on something that the mind or the ego would call evil or unfortunate, does the light care? And here's where we get to the part that some people find disturbing. The neutrality, at a certain point of distance out away from the business of form, which we all participate in because we're people, awake or not. We all do participate in this. But at some point when the, all of that is suspended, or when the absolute, which was the bottom thing on this board yesterday, when that, at that point, it's, Rumi's poem about beyond the good and bad, there's a field out there. He wasn't kidding. Okay, but what I'm saying is, all of us have, the very thing you long for is neutral. It's completely neutral. It's like light. It's space. So when you're observing yourself function and be attached and caught up in thought, all of that, and it feels, you're thinking, oh my God, I thought I'd gotten so much better at this, and now you realize you're just back in the pits again of the ego and the mind, all that. What's happening, that is not light and spaciousness having an awareness of what's occurring in it, in your apparent self. That's your ego looking at itself in a mirror. So when you feel bad about how you're doing, all you have is what's going on right now. I can say that 10,000 times and it won't be enough. When you feel bad about what you see there, the part of you that you long to know is not the one that's feeling bad. Okay? It's the ego looking at itself in a mirror, judging. The space and light do not judge. So, all of the attempt, and so then what do? You see yourself being whatever it is. Then you wince, you look away. For one thing, you don't want to see it because that doesn't look very spiritual. Oh no, so you're in this constant conflict, which you've been in your whole life. This is just a new version of the conflict. And then you're trying to fix yourself, which asks you to believe in time. It says, well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make this intention, try harder, and meanwhile, the part of you that senses itself when it goes out in the trees, that's sitting on a beach in the mountains, feels absolutely at peace. That part of you that's just like what you think is external to you doesn't care what your ego does. So when you get caught up in it and try to fix it, you're trying to fix something that doesn't need to be fixed and cannot be fixed. The thing about being present, and when you, in this present moment, which is all you've ever got, when you let yourself just see what's occurring in here, in that neutral way, and you have this capacity, not in a guilty way, not in a judgmental way, not in a way to try to fix it or do better, not in a wincing way, just observing. What happens there is you're sensing, you're looking with, if you will, the eyes of your deep true self. All we're trying to do here, short of the big thing having occurred, is observe what's happening right now with the belief in the reality of the self and thought and time. What's underway right now to keep all of that seeming real? If you're looking at it in a guilty way, from within the same machine that it all depends upon, you don't get anywhere. Do you see what I'm saying? But we all have the capacity to look neutrally, to just observe it as phenomenon. And so, so one of the things that goes when things change is the appearance that there's somebody here experiencing stuff out there, or that life is happening to somebody here, or that I'm thinking this thought, or, one of the shocker things is when you go, if you bother, do you care, looking for yourself, where yourself is, you can't find any place you're not, let's just say. So it's that all with one thing. It's all just phenomena. What's going on inside of you is on no different plane of awareness from what's going on out there. So if there's, now I'm talking about in a moment in which you're absolutely present and your mind is quiet. And this can occur well before the big thing, okay? You can watch it happen. When awareness is unboundaried, which is in the actual reality of what we are, it observes sensation in the body, feeling like, fear, anger, observes thought, observes leaves blowing in the wind, observes a sound of conversation over there, a car going down the road, this body's driving. It's all on the same plane. There is no inner and outer. Do you see what I'm saying? So your ability, the ability of your consciousness to observe phenomena that are occurring inside of you, the thinking that's occurring, the feeling that you're experiencing, the body's sensation, to observe that just as if it were a cloud, or the thunder, or the news that you're watching, the things on the screen. That's when you get somewhere. The appearance that what I'm feeling is my thoughts, that there's a continuity of a self moving through time, and I have to work on this self. That, of course, is part of the essential problem. So your ability to, when you're observing yourself and feeling bad about what you see, or feeling good, feeling like, oh good, I get it now. It's just as bad. It's the exact same thing. It's not as painful, but when you're able to just watch that as phenomena, it's like, oh, that's how a person keeps itself going. Oh, look at that. I couldn't have had that thought if I didn't first believe that time were a real thing. So the mind, again, the mind visualizes a possible future in which X will have occurred, or something being dreaded. It's wonderful things, horrible things are all the same. The mind is able to visualize that. It depends upon the belief in time for that to occur. That the future is something that you can somehow get to, which is very different from now. You're not saying this to yourself. So I wonder if anybody wants to say anything. And if you have a question or you want to make a comment, please wait till the mic gets to you so everybody can hear. Anybody have any something?
We were talking about the difference between something about thought and attention. And I can see myself trying for attention and it's just thought. I mean, when does attention, is there anything you can say that would differentiate?
So when
I fool myself a lot with that.
Yeah. So as soon as you realize you're thinking, which it will often dawn on you because there's discomfort, okay? I'll say a little more about that in a second. But as soon as you notice that you're thinking, you're in attention. It's already happened. You slip back in and you start believing the thoughts again. You know, if there's any, attention is neutral. It experiences no discomfort about what it sees. So if you feel discomfort, as soon as you realize you're feeling discomfort and you get that it's the thought that's causing it, and you see that you are thinking, attention is occurring right then. It's already happening. Okay?
Could you say detachment also, or is that something different?
You can't go after detachment. I mean, it's an idea, it's a thought. It occurs, but it occurs when you realize, when something lucky, usually random, occurs to cause you to be in attention versus in thought. Just anytime that you observe neutrally what you're doing, you're detached from it. You can't see a thing that you're in. Okay? A lot of the reason that thought starts up in the first place, and this can also be a thing to do when you notice the thought going on, the repairing that's constantly going on that I mentioned before, where, the mind is constantly trying to help us think it's going to be okay, I'm okay, it's not really that bad, I'll do better, blah, 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 blah. Usually that starts up, or very often it starts up, because we don't like what happened, we're in resistance, or we're trying to somehow fix ourselves in the presence of it. But the thing that occurred before that was something felt bad. Something occurred that felt bad. As soon as anything feels bad to us, we almost never stay with it. We like to stay with the good stuff, but even that sometimes we're afraid to stay with, because we're afraid we'll spook it or something. So when the mind is being very busy, very often if you stop, and by the way, when the mind gets very busy like that, it starts generating emotion, and that's the suffering. That is where suffering occurs, right there. If the thought had never started up, and the primary, the original spontaneous feeling that occurred, and this is like that, it's part of the now, the feeling, this is not a mental phenomenon, it's almost a sensory thing. If the primary feeling could be stayed with, very often the mind wouldn't even start up. So if you notice you're busy, trying to, whatever it is, and you go kind of think, wow, this is where self-inquiry comes in very handy. Can I possibly see what set this thought into motion? Very often, if you kind of go back, you'll get to something hurt. Something embarrassed you, something scared you, and you didn't want to stay with it. But when you're really in the now, and you're not resisting anything, and you don't go up into your head, and you just feel, this is awake people, feel, okay? In a moment of awakeness, you feel, we're sensate, we're physical. We are located in space, somebody said it yesterday. We do, you do feel pain, whatever it is. You walk out and it's a gorgeous day and something goes, that's feeling. That's easy, that's comfortable, but you drive in a car, I mentioned this in my book, you're in heavy traffic, you look in the rearview mirror and the grill of a truck fills your mirror. What do you feel? Fear. But in 2 seconds it's become anger for a lot of people. It's like, son of a bitch, how dare he? And why do we do that? Why do we do that? Because we don't want to stay with oh my God, I could die. But the very first thing is, even before, oh my God, I could die, that's words and thoughts. But there's the animal, visceral danger. Okay, if we could live in that spontaneous thing, instead of going up in our heads to manage that feeling, the emotional garbage that becomes a tumor that we haul around with us all our lives and then have to recover from, that wouldn't have even started, would never start up. So you don't have to keep doing that. You don't have to keep doing it. Here's another thing about living in the future. If you think, oh my God, I've got to wait till I wake up to stop suffering, don't do that to yourself. Watch how you cause it. Watch how, when something uncomfortable happens, you're embarrassed, and you make a fool of yourself in front of a bunch of people, or you feel like you were misunderstood, or you notice you're so proud, you feel like you finally understood something, and then it turns out, and you put something in motion in your work life or your family, and it doesn't work. It turns out not to have been a good idea, or it's not a good idea anymore. Notice how you've taken a hit to your sense of who you are. Notice it. Don't feel bad about it. It's already happening. That's one thing. You know, when you're watching what's occurring in here, it's already here. It's real. It's already happening. So to feel bad about it or to wish it weren't, it's madness. The thing that makes us feel at peace is when attention is allowed to flood everything that's really real right now that's in our present field of awareness, including whatever trauma you're going through inside. Anybody?
So one of the things I've noticed over the last few years is the thinking that causes an enormous amount of suffering is this idea that there is someone to awaken. And, you know, I've been to a lot of things and I come to things like this and people talk about, you know, I'm awake or that person's awake. And it feels like that it becomes a goal that just is always sought. Mm-hmm. And I think what you're saying, and Paul, and I just kind of want clarification, is to even just watch that, because it is endless, and chasing awakening seems like the most ridiculous thing that will never happen, because it's believing that there's something to actually, there's an individual to awaken. And so I'm trying to reconcile that, because I come to a lot of these things and people refer to other people as awake. And that doesn't make sense from this type of perspective. Like that you can actually do something, that there's some individual thing to awaken. So is that what you're saying? Like kind of watch even that thinking phenomenon of this small...
It's a thought, yeah.
And step back from it because it's not true and you're never going to fulfill that.
You don't even have to reason with yourself about it. It's like engaging it at all, that it's useless or whatever, is already, you're getting in there and dancing with it. See that it's a thought that your mind came up with. You know, this whole thing is about constantly backing yourself back into this, looks uncomfortable, but only when the ego does the looking. It's like, this is it. This right here is it. Anything else that goes on up here is a thought, including that one. All that has happened for somebody that we call awake is this little tiny shift in perspective. But we can't make that happen. All we can do is really get familiar with the perspective we've got now, the appearance of reality. So when you have a thought like that, you know, those people are awake, I'm not, I wish I was, I hope I will be, and you can just stay with that. Look at the thought. Also stay with its power to keep sneaking in all the windows and coming in under the door and saying, no, but really. You know, you just keep saying, it's, you know, my mind made this. My mind made this. As soon as you engage with it, you're cooked. Huh.
Thank you.
It sounded like you said the feelings come first. And I've always thought the thought came first that causes the feeling, the uncomfortable feeling. So whenever I'm feeling uncomfortable, I'm always looking for, well, what's the thought? What's the thought that's causing this, you know? And so does the feeling come first?
I'm making a distinction between feeling and emotion, and I go into this in a lot of detail in the book I just wrote, that the emotion is secondary to feeling. The feeling is the spontaneous thing. You know, something usually in the environment has occurred that it's like how you can tell you're alive. You know, something, a feeling. Then the thought starts up as a way to protect you from the feeling usually, or to manage it, or understand, or put it in some kind of context. Label it, know what it is, good thing, bad thing, whatever. And then the emotions start up. So you're talking about emotions, and yes, emotions you can, you know, always point back to some series of thoughts that cause them. And that's a wonderful thing to do. But it looks like thought comes all on its own. You know, we're not watching. But if you look back, But what started the thought? Or if you just, when you get, the better you get at really paying attention to what you're feeling right now, spontaneous, like, awareness is here. When something stings, you're going to feel it. You're going to know right then, often. And it hurts. But if you allow it, it's like physical pain. Just it's got to have its little life. It's part of being a human being. If you let it have its little life, very often the mind won't even start up. So you don't even get to the point of emotion. That what I call a sting or bite, sometimes it's painful to be alive. There's been reference made to that. Sometimes somebody will die and, your heart will break. That's not suffering. That's clean pain when you don't resist it. So a whole lot of life is like that in subtle ways, And you could say, the quieter your mind gets and the less substantial your ego seems, the less it seems like what you are, maybe the less there will be that spontaneous feeling. But it doesn't matter. That's all secondary. That's all the mind thinking about it. When there is that spontaneous something, somebody, it goes on all day long.
Somebody looks at you and you think they're thinking something negative about you or something.
Yeah. But the very first thing was you felt bad.
So it starts with the feeling.
Yeah.
And then the thought and then the emotion.
Yeah, and then pretty soon, you hate them, and you don't ever want to get in a relationship again, and God, we don't have to do that to ourselves. But the thing is to watch that we are doing it. We actually are doing that to ourselves, and we don't have to. The other wonderful thing about getting that this is it. This really is what you got. Is every moment, you can do it different from how you've ever done it before. It's like, wow, this again, another opportunity. And, as soon as I say it or think about it, it becomes silly and stupid. But when you feel it in your viscera, when you get that every single thing you're doing, you're reinventing time over and over again. Every time you hope, every time you dread, every time you feel guilty, just looking back. Every moment you do that, you're telling yourself all over again that time is real. Telling yourself all over again that your thoughts are the same thing as this immediate reality. Every moment you're creating that thing I call the three-sided pyramid. Every single moment. So when your awareness is only in right now, you can watch how that happens. Oh my God. What we're talking about is discovering the illusion that we live in, okay? So you're constantly constructing it. We're not at the mercy of this. We are doing it. And when you can see, oh my God, wow. When you really get that you're actually doing it over and over again every moment, but you're only really just looking at this moment, it's the only one you can see. Once you really get that, at some point you go, I don't think it doesn't make sense anymore. Or, you don't have that thought. It just stops functioning. It's like when you know that Santa Claus is not real. Check, looking around, making sure Okay. In short order, okay, I remember the day my kids were in the back seat and they're back there talking about Santa Claus, and I'm going, uh-oh. I was like, I could tell they were getting to the age, and I thought, and I was thinking, oh, maybe we could just, okay, if this one's falling apart, maybe we could just hang on to the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy for a little bit longer. But no, Santa Claus goes, and the others go in short order. It's like, you can't, but we're like that. This thing that we have going, triumvirate, we think time is real and something's going to happen later, and, all that, and we think the ego is what we really deeply are, and we're constantly believing our thoughts. It's just like Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and whoever the other one is, the tooth person. Fairy. So when you watch it, when you be like a scientist to yourself, when you look through a microscope has no opinion about what it sees. Okay, it's just, oh, look at that, right? A microscope will shine or do whatever it magnify just the same, regardless of what's on the slide. So when you're observing yourself function, keeping your personhood going on, you can just watch it neutrally. We all have this capacity. when you're looking through this murky lens of the ego that feels bad, or wishes it were different, you're never going to get anywhere. Because the one that's doing the looking is the one that's got the trouble in the first place, that's been trying to improve itself all its life. So something in us is able to just see, attend. When you can do that, when you can experience what's going on in your interior, your thoughts and emotions and all that, as if it were the clouds and the trees, just phenomena, wow, does the light come on? Uh-huh.
Forms or patterns that I've engaged many times in the past have developed like a life of their own and become so powerful that I've gotten pretty good at observing a lot of my thoughts, but some of them seem to be kind of like entities of themselves, and they're difficult to watch. And you were talking about how the difference between just kind of, I forget how you worded it, sitting and looking at it, its full power, versus engaging it. Can you maybe speak a little more about the difference between the two?
You're talking about something that's got emotional, it's the emotion that's being experienced, right? That's why it feels probably like it's very hard to get at a distance from it, because it's flooding your body. I'm guessing.
It's like a battle starts at the beginning, and then it's like this thing. So I have to kind of pause and space. But there's certain things that are just,
Yeah. So we're either, in any given moment, we're either conscious or we're not. And conscious means observing what's going on. Unconscious means it's got a life of its own, the thought. So we can't, so you're there, in this kind of situation, there's going to be perhaps intermittent awareness, maybe unconsciousness predominating, but occasionally, you become aware of what you're feeling, about, how ferocious the thought pattern is and how much you're believing it and all that. You can't, the moments that are gone when you were lost in it, they're just gone. They're gone like everything before is gone, constantly gone. But the ones where you're aware, you can, you can watch it to the extent that you're able to watch it. But sometimes when emotion is, when you're really sunk, and you're, which is what goes on often, there's a difference between indulging the thought and allowing yourself to feel what you're actually feeling. Sometimes people think, and so it can look as though the goal somehow is to rise above or get out of, some way, put at a distance, the thing that you're feeling. But if it's actually ongoing, in other words, if it's part of your present moment reality, there's really, nothing to do but surrender to the feeling of it. But that is not the same thing as indulging the thought. And it's, you might, as you're, it's like the key to this is to be in the body. So when something like that has really got you, to the extent that you can just feel it and let whatever thoughts gave rise to it either kind of go into suspension or try to stay aware that they're thoughts. But this is not about escaping emotion. And people are afraid, they're often afraid to give themselves to, especially painful feeling. For one thing, it feels bad, but it looks like spiritually a bad idea, like you're going to, feed fuel to the thing or keeps the thing going. But if it's already here, it is part of your momentary reality. And sometimes what happens is when we completely surrender to whatever the feeling is, whether it's this kind of egoic thing or physical pain or grief or something like that, complete surrender to something that's bodied puts us into presence often. When there's no resistance at all, all of a sudden, when you stop fighting it because it's unspiritual to feel anger or whatever the thing is. When you stop fighting it and you just let it like burn through you, often to your surprise, you'll sort of feel like you come out the other side and you didn't even know there was another side. When you're in it, it feels like the entire reality. But when you completely surrender, the larger thing that you are becomes apparent. The thing in which this is all occurring. And from there, the fact that the artificiality of the thought thing becomes very vivid. So, do you see? Yeah. Wait for it's coming.
I've been playing with this, it's more than an idea, but that awareness is happening on its own. That if I'm lost in thought, I just may not notice it. As opposed to doing some kind of practice where I'm trying to notice this and trying to notice that. And, so I've been pulling my attention back a little bit to notice awareness as it becomes conscious, like a sound. And I'm just wondering if you could speak about that. The idea that I have is that I don't need to go out and be aware. Awareness is going on, and I can fall back into it. That it will rise up as I am not absorbed in my thoughts, that I don't need to make it happen.
Yeah, that's very good.
So I guess I want some feedback about that.
Yeah. It's always, we were talking about this a little bit this morning, awareness is always on something, constantly. Normally it's on the content of our thoughts. That's what we're giving attention to. As if the mental picture they're creating is really occurring right now. That's what awareness is doing. Because awareness is attending something that's not real, it doesn't create a feeling of vitality when we do that. It creates a feeling of pain. So there's the body experiences awareness. When awareness goes from living in the thoughts that are created to the bird over there, it's gone. So it's always doing something. That's what I'm saying. But it's when we notice what it's doing, that there's vitality, that there's the feeling of, then it's like awareness aware of itself. So when we're attending something that is real, the bird, the sound of the toilet flushing, then we're not, it becomes more possible for us to notice the sensation of awareness itself because it's not being tainted by the unreal. The ego wants to think that it's when it's being tainted by unpleasantness that that's what seems to cause unhappiness. It's not. It's the real versus the not. So when you become aware of what awareness is doing, it's been doing something all along. It's just that you're more likely to notice when it's engaged with something that's not made up, like the self or what you've been thinking.
Do you understand the difference between, okay, I'm going to be aware now, and I'm going to pay attention, and I'm going to, versus, there was a sound.
Yeah.
There was.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to be aware now is the thought. It's like, just do it. It already happened. I mean, in a way, okay, I'm going to be aware now is like, it's like planning to live. But it's just a thing that the mind does to say, there's just a recognition, Awareness is noticing itself now. That's really what that is. But it's always been somewhere. And so normally our attention, we're just like, dogs that love the scent of anything. Our attention will go, it just wanders, all the time. It's somewhere, usually up here. But to notice where it is and to realize that we have latitude about what to do with it, wow. We do have latitude what to do with it. So, again, this is the thing about let yourself be in the present. Notice what's going on now. What is your attention on? What's it been on for the last 3 hours, in the course of a normal day? It's been somewhere. It's not that it isn't there and then it is. It's always somewhere. When it's on your apparent self, then profitable things can occur. Or when it's on, the face of the person you're talking to, then you feel, that's how we feel we're alive. That's how we can tell we're here. It's what attention is doing. It has nothing to do. We keep thinking it's all about the content of our lives. That's what's going to make things good finally, is to get the circumstances good. Here we're back in time. Got to improve the circumstances tomorrow in 5 minutes. It doesn't, it's why people think, how is it possible for somebody who has had that shift to be constantly peaceful in the presence of all the misery, including in their own lives? That's based upon an assumption that the condition has to do with the stuff that's happening. It has nothing to do with the stuff that's happening. Nothing. It has to do with presence. It has to do with the mind being quiet. It has to do with really being with reality, which is this right now, period. This is your life. This, what you can perceive right now, is your life. And to the extent that you let awareness be with that, absolutely without resistance and without mental filters, regardless of what's going on, you will feel alive, you'll feel awake. So stop trying to manage the outer stuff. I'm not saying it's unimportant completely, but if you notice yourself thinking, oh, if I could just get this relationship going, that'd do it. I could just get the better job. Notice yourself having those kinds of thoughts. Always, God, trouble yourself to look at the underlying assumptions you're making. We almost never see them. They almost never come into the light of awareness. But one of the assumptions there is the outer stuff is going to finally make everything okay. It hasn't yet, has it? I mean, sometimes memory is useful. You live long enough, you can look at, there's been a trend. But, we lie to ourselves constantly. Like, well, maybe this, maybe this, maybe this. Maybe I'll wake up, maybe that. Any more questions? In the back, the mic's right behind you.
You mentioned just briefly, I would say, the sort of revelation of oneness where you are the contents of your consciousness, or you are what your attention is immediately falling upon. And I just wanted to know if that's like, like I am the flower over there, or I am the cow tree. So I just wondered, I just don't know what that is. I mean, I have a question about it. I can see that, yes, if you're identified with consciousness, then everything that's within consciousness, the contents, is somehow consciousness also. Is that what that's about, or?
It's hard to think about it. I mean, that's the mind trying to get at it from the outside of it.
Yeah.
But in a moment, and most anyone has experienced this, in a moment of, because by hook or crook, the sense of self is suspended momentarily. And, I always often think of this happening outside, but it wouldn't only be happening outside. There is not the sense of a perceiver and a perceived. it's not that you feel like you're the flower, you're the bird. You're not, the you isn't operating.
Okay.
It's just not operational. So there, there's a sense of, when there's no resistance and the mind is utterly quiet, the sense of beingness is of spaciousness. So as soon as you put words on it, it gets stupid, but I'm going to try to put words on it. Okay, if I am something, I am the space in which everything in my field of awareness is occurring.
Okay.
But as soon as you assemble that thought, it's just a thought. But it's a visceral, somebody described it to me once as, he was looking out at the fields and he felt like he was the fields. And he's
Right.
trying to say this to me in a way that will make sense. And, I understand. And it can't possibly make sense. It just sounds silly, I'm the fields. Well, but it's it's just an appearance that there's somebody here. And for once that got to go into suspension, and then we know that was just, it's a thing we play at to be a person. Yeah.
Okay.
Somebody else had
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you just say more about the difference between feeling and emotion? I didn't understand.
Feeling is spontaneous and it occurs before the mind gets hold of anything. It occurs in response to something that occurs in the environment. Emotion is caused by thought. So the feeling occurs, it's like concurrent with the event, virtually, the outer thing. Then the mind gets hold of it, starts doing its whatever, making sense of, defending, marshalling arguments, making it okay. And that generates emotion, and that's the suffering.
So if something happens and you have an immediate experience of fear, and the mind then gets engaged, the emotion still might be fear, it just has a different quality. And it's not that it's necessarily something different.
When something happens that's actually dangerous, where you could say fear is appropriate, it never even makes it to the level of thought. I mean, what I mean is, when there's something that can be done, when the truck's behind you, you can't do anything. But when the bear is coming after you, you go directly from fear to adrenaline, and you function, you become a body. You become an animal that wants to stay alive. So anything that happens where fear is not, and even then that isn't, it's just like a second of fear, but then you're just functioning. So, anything that causes the normal kind of fear that we typically experience very quickly goes into the mind. And then, so in other words, I'm saying almost all fear that human beings experience is mind-caused, almost across the board. Almost. It's heartbreaking. When you've really been relieved of that and you really see that your thought's been doing that all your life, it'll break your heart. And the ego wants to say, oh no, but it's true, I really am going to die. We really are all going to die. Is it relevant right now? So any thought you can ever have, that's a true thought. I mean, there's a true thought. I'm going to die. Okay, that one you can take to the bank. But does that mean we should tell ourselves that always? Oh my God, I'm going to die. Be miserable all our lives? No. And every thought we ever have is just like that one, including all the ones that cause fear. It's not about whether it's true. It's like, is it relevant right now? Is it as relevant as the chair and the person and the bagel? Anyway, I think maybe we got time for one more if there's another. Yeah, in the back. We can talk later if you want. In the back. Yeah. Oh, it's coming.
Hi. So, okay, you shared a story about your friend's experience with the shoe, and I can't help thinking about this similar experience I had about 11 or 12 years ago, and I think about it often, and I think about it often because I question it, and so in a nutshell, what happened was she helped me, my roommate helped me get a job when I moved to the mountains at a fine dining restaurant at the very top of Banner Elk. And she had drove every day for a week, and I said, well, let me drive, it's my turn. And we got off work, and we both got our on the house desserts that we put in the back seat. And I was driving down the mountain and I caught gravel when I was coming around a curve, and which caused the car to actually like flip and like roll down the side of the mountain. And all I could think about at that moment was my chocolate cake in the back. and it just like it just kind of like trips me out because neither one of us had on our seatbelts, and the only reason we stopped was because we rolled into a tree, which caught our fall. And she ended up in the back seat, banged up, bruised up, and I did not move from the driver's seat, and I had no scratch on me. And, you know, it was just, I just got chills when you told that story because...
How was the cake? No, I'm just... Go ahead.
Actually, the cake, I ate it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, did it flip around and stuff in the plastic? No.
Yeah, the icing was on the lid, but I scraped it off.
Yeah, good. Okay, so yeah, keep going.
So I guess so what I've been, you know, questioning about this experience is was that I've been thinking, okay, so this I've attributed it to a defense mechanism, but when you told the story about your friend, it made me kind of look at it in a different way, because it's also like I've been thinking it's either been a defense mechanism but I feel this extreme sense of like not necessarily power but like serenity, because I was not thinking about anything but something really positive in this like awful, scary, tragic to most people experience, right?
Yeah.
And I almost, and then I start to kind of feel a little guilt because I'm like, we experienced this awful thing, yet I'm thinking about something so positive, and I probably like look like a freak if I tell people about it, but at the same time, it's pretty amazing.
So what was going on there was it's just like playing ping pong. When a person's inside a car and it's doing this, you know viscerally, you're not thinking it, you don't have time to think it, you didn't have time to be afraid. There's no point. You know that the physical world is in charge here. There's nothing. You're absolutely at the mercy of physical forces there. So you're relieved of fear, you know, anticipation, anything. It's just like happening. You're just like watching the car flip around, remembering that the cake is in the backseat. So that's attention. You had no spare attention on anything but cake and car in motion. Later, it's after something like that. I don't know if you got scared after the fact, but you know, often people, it's when they revisit what happened. Maybe you were relieved of that, but
I haven't really. I didn't really feel fear, which is kind of strange or odd or something. But I was more worried about my roommate than anything else. Yeah. So.
It's a great example. Don't second guess it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know, we're supposed to stop? Okay, yeah, please wait for the mic.
Well, I too was struck by that story, and I will identify myself as a recovering psychotherapist. So what I was thinking of, that was an amazing story about the shoe, and then I can think of, and this is the part of me that I guess isn't fully recovered, taking your cousin or whoever that was, thinking, wow, let's go look for more lost items. And where is there some place where there's what in my world we would call denial of her grief, of her loss? In other words, there's some place, I'm getting the beauty of what you're saying, but then I'm thinking we can take that story and do something that doesn't feel like it's really wholesome.
Yeah. So here's where the feeling thing comes in. She was exactly right to sob when feeling overtook her that way. Mm-hmm. So denial is not allowing ourselves to sob when sobbing wants to happen. Right. When grief's breaking us apart and we try to get busy looking for lost shoes, we won't find the lost shoes, and we'll also grow a tumor. I mean, an emotional tumor. So, all that story illustrates is what happens when, illustrates the power of pure present moment attention to disengage the real seemingness of any thought. But, feelings that are real and are part of the present scenery must be felt. And then, then there's no denial going on.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think it's time to, I don't know. Is it?